They said she was too ugly to be queen, too plain, too ordinary. The entire kingdom laughed when Alpha King Torsten chose the beautiful Sigrid over the peculiar-looking Astrid. But what they didn't know was that Astrid wasn't just any rejected bride. She was the one woman who could bring the most powerful werewolf king to his knees. And by the time Torsten realized what he'd lost, she had already taken everything he valued. His heart, his throne, and his entire future. This is the story of how the woman everyone underestimated became the most powerful queen in history, and how the king who rejected her spent the rest of his life trying to win her back. But some mistakes can never be undone. Some hearts, once broken, can never be made whole again. And some women, once awakened to their true power, can never be conquered. Stay with me until the end, because what happens in the final moments will leave you absolutely breathless. The great hall of Nordheim Castle had never seen such a gathering. Every noble family from every pack in the northern territories had arrived for the most anticipated announcement in a generation. Alpha King Torsten Bjornsson, the youngest and most powerful werewolf king in 3 centuries, was finally going to choose his queen. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. The way the torches flickered against the stone walls. The way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The way 2 women stood before the throne, their fates hanging in the balance of one man's decision. On the left stood Sigrid Eriksdotter. Golden hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of sunlight. Eyes as blue as the northern sky. Features so perfect they seemed carved by the gods themselves. She wore a gown of crimson silk that clung to her curves, and when she smiled, the entire hall seemed to brighten. Sigrid was the daughter of the most powerful alpha in the Eastern Territories, a woman bred from birth to be royalty. On the right stood Astrid Gunnarsdottir. And here's where our story truly begins. Because Astrid was everything Sigrid was not. Her hair was the color of mud after rain, neither brown nor blonde but something in between. Her face was long, her nose prominent, her mouth too wide. She was tall and gangly, with hands that seemed too large for her wrists and feet that made her trip over her own shadow. The gown she wore, a simple thing of gray wool, hung on her frame like a sack. But Astrid's eyes. Oh, her eyes were something different entirely. They were the color of storm clouds gathering on the horizon, gray with flecks of silver that seemed to glow when the light hit them just right. And in those eyes lived something that Sigrid's beautiful face could never contain. Intelligence, depth, and a power that most people were too blind to see. Astrid was the daughter of Gunnar, a minor alpha from the western borderlands. She had been included in the selection process as a political courtesy, nothing more. Everyone knew she had no real chance. Everyone knew that King Torsten would choose Sigrid. It was destiny. It was obvious. It was the only choice that made sense. But for 3 months leading up to this moment, something unexpected had happened. During the courtship trials, Torsten had spent time with both women. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he had fallen in love with Astrid. Started small. A conversation about military strategy where Astrid demonstrated knowledge that impressed even Torsten's generals. A moment in the gardens where she rescued a wounded bird with such tenderness that Torsten saw a glimpse of the mother she might become. A night during a border patrol where they fought side by side against rogue wolves, and Astrid proved herself as fierce as any warrior he'd ever commanded. Torsten began seeking her out. Their conversations stretched long into the night. She made him laugh with her dry wit. She challenged his assumptions. She saw him not as the Alpha King, not as the most powerful man in the realm, but as Torsten, just a man trying to be worthy of his crown. They shared their first kiss under a new moon, hidden from the prying eyes of the court. Torsten had never felt anything like it. Sigrid's kisses had been practiced, perfect but empty. Astrid's kiss was awkward, uncertain, but filled with something real, something that made his wolf howl with recognition. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he had whispered against her lips that night. Astrid had pulled back, those storm-gray eyes searching his face. "Don't say things you don't mean, Your Majesty." "I've never meant anything more," he'd sworn. But Torsten was a coward. He was a coward in the way that even kings can be cowards. He was afraid of what people would say. Afraid of what his council would think. Afraid of the political alliance he would lose if he rejected Sigrid. Afraid of appearing weak for choosing with his heart instead of his head. So on that fateful day, as the entire kingdom watched, as Astrid stood before him with hope barely concealed in her eyes, King Torsten made his choice. "I choose Lady Sigrid Eriksdotter to be my queen and mate." The hall erupted in cheers. Sigrid's smile was radiant, triumphant. The nobles nodded approvingly. It was the right choice, they said. The only choice. The king had shown wisdom beyond his years. But Torsten wasn't looking at Sigrid. He was looking at Astrid. And what he saw in that moment would haunt him for the rest of his life. Astrid didn't cry. She didn't scream or rage or collapse. Her face simply closed, like a door slamming shut. The light in those storm-gray eyes dimmed, then died entirely. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Was it pity, disappointment, or something worse? Understanding. She curtsied low and proper. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. May you have the marriage you deserve." And then she turned and walked out of the hall, her back straight, her head high. The nobles laughed. "She takes rejection well," someone commented. "Probably expected it looking like that," another added. The laughter grew. Even Sigrid allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. But Torsten felt something crack inside his chest. Because he understood what Astrid had really said. Not congratulations. Not a blessing. But a curse dressed in politeness. "May you have the marriage you deserve." And he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that he deserved exactly what was coming. Astrid left the castle that night. No grand departure, no tearful goodbye. She simply returned to her father's lands in the western borderlands, to a small keep on the edge of civilization where wolves learned to survive in harsh conditions or died trying. Meanwhile, King Torsten married Lady Sigrid in a ceremony that would be remembered for generations. It was perfect in every way. Sigrid was the perfect bride, perfect queen, perfect in every gesture and word. But perfection, Torsten discovered, was cold. Beautiful but empty. Like a statue carved of ice. Their wedding night was a disaster he never spoke of. Sigrid performed her duties with mechanical precision, but there was no warmth, no connection, no spark of the passion he'd felt with Astrid. She lay beside him afterward and said, "We shall have strong heirs, Your Majesty. That's what matters." The weeks turned into months. Sigrid proved to be exactly what everyone expected. A beautiful ornament who smiled at the right times, said the right things, and cared about nothing but her own status and comfort. She had no interest in governance, no concern for the people, no depth beyond her perfect surface. She spent extravagant sums on gowns and jewels. She treated the servants with casual cruelty. When Torsten tried to discuss matters of state with her, she yawned and changed the subject to the latest court gossip. Their conversations were shallow, their silences uncomfortable, their marriage a gilded cage that trapped them both. Torsten found himself thinking about Astrid constantly. Where was she? What was she doing? Did she hate him? He sent ravens with letters that he never had the courage to actually dispatch. He dreamed of her nearly every night. His wolf, the primal part of his nature, had stopped speaking to him entirely, a silent rebuke for rejecting its true mate. Then, 6 months after his wedding, disturbing news began reaching the capital. The western borderlands, always a troubled region, were changing. Raiders who had plagued the area for decades were disappearing. Rogue wolf packs that had terrorized villages were being driven out or destroyed. Villages that had barely survived were suddenly thriving. Roads were being built. Trade was flourishing. And at the center of it all was Lady Astrid. Torsten's spymaster brought him reports. Astrid had returned home and, instead of hiding in shame, had begun transforming her father's territory. She'd started by training the local militia herself. Then she'd negotiated trade agreements with human settlements that her father had always ignored. She'd implemented new farming techniques that increased crop yields. She'd established a school for the children of common wolves, something unheard of in their society. But most shocking of all, Astrid had discovered something during an expedition into the old mountains, an ancient silver mine that had been lost for centuries. Not just any silver but moon silver, a rare mineral that could be forged into weapons capable of killing even the most powerful supernatural creatures. The discovery made her father's small territory suddenly one of the wealthiest in the realm. Torsten told himself he was concerned about the balance of power. That's why he decided to visit the western borderlands. That's why he needed to see what Astrid had built. It had nothing to do with the fact that he couldn't stop thinking about her. Nothing to do with the way his marriage had become a beautiful nightmare. Nothing to do with the way he woke up every morning next to Sigrid and felt more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. He rode into Astrid's territory with a small escort, expecting to find the same rough, impoverished borderland he'd always known. Instead, he found something that took his breath away. The villages were clean and prosperous. Children played in streets that had once been dangerous after dark. Markets bustled with goods from across the realm and beyond. Farmers worked fields that yielded harvests the rest of the kingdom could only dream of. And everywhere, people spoke of Lady Astrid with a reverence usually reserved for religious figures. "She saved us," an old woman told him in one village. "When the raiders came last winter, she led the defense herself. Killed their leader in single combat. After that, none dared trouble us again. She taught my daughter to read," a merchant said. "Said every wolf deserves education, not just the nobles. Changed our lives, she did." The prosperity wasn't just economic. There was something else, something Torsten recognized because he'd been searching for it his entire reign. These people were happy. They had hope. They believed in their future. And it was all because of the woman he'd rejected for being too ugly, too plain, too ordinary. Torsten arrived at Astrid's keep as the sun was setting. It had been expanded since his last visit years ago, but it remained modest by noble standards. No soaring towers or impressive fortifications. Just solid, practical construction designed for function over form, much like Astrid herself. She received him in the great hall, and Torsten's heart stopped when he saw her. 6 months had transformed her, though he couldn't quite say how. She wore a simple gown of deep blue, her mud-colored hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her face was the same, long, prominent nose, wide mouth, but somehow she seemed beautiful to him now. Or perhaps he'd finally learned to see what had been there all along. But it was her eyes that struck him most. Those storm-gray eyes that had gone dead the day he rejected her were alive again, burning with an inner fire that made her seem like she was glowing from within. "Your Majesty," she said, curtsying. Her voice was polite, formal, completely empty of emotion. "To what do we owe the honor of this visit?" "I wanted to see what you've built here," Torsten said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "The reports don't do it justice." "How kind of you to say." Astrid gestured to a seat. "Will you be staying long?" "I'm afraid we can't offer the luxuries you're accustomed to at court. But our beds are clean and our food is honest." The words were courteous, but Torsten heard the edge beneath them. He deserved that edge. He deserved far worse. They dined that evening with Astrid's father, Gunnar, and her council of advisors. Torsten was impressed despite himself. This wasn't a gathering of incompetent border nobles. These were sharp minds, discussing complex problems with sophisticated solutions. And at the center of it all was Astrid, commanding their respect effortlessly. After dinner, Astrid offered to show him the moon's silver mine. They rode out into the mountains as the moon rose, casting silver light across the landscape. Guards stayed at a respectful distance, giving them the illusion of privacy. "Why did you do it?" Astrid asked finally, her eyes on the path ahead. "Why did you make me believe you cared, if you were always going to choose her?" Torsten felt the question like a knife between his ribs. "I was afraid," he admitted, "of what people would think. Of making the wrong choice for the kingdom. I thought I was being responsible. But I was just being a coward. Astrid was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part was? She said softly. Not that you chose her, but that you chose her after making me hope. You gave me something I'd never let myself want, and then you took it away. That was cruel, Torsten. That was the cruelest thing anyone has ever done to me. He wanted to reach for her, but the distance between them felt like an ocean. I'm sorry, he said. Those words aren't enough, I know. But I'm sorrier than I've ever been for anything in my life. Don't be sorry for me, Astrid said, and now there was steel in her voice. You did me the greatest favor anyone could. You showed me that I didn't need your crown or your love to be powerful. Built this, me. Not as your queen. Not as anyone's mate. Just as Astrid. And it's mine in a way your throne will never truly be yours. They reached the mine, and Astrid showed him the moon's silver veins that ran through the mountain like rivers of starlight. It was more valuable than Torsten had imagined. With this resource, Astrid's territory could arm an entire army with weapons capable of defeating any supernatural threat. It could tip the balance of power in the entire realm. The council wants me to sell exclusively to the crown, Astrid said, running her hand along the silver-veined wall. But I've been considering other offers. The Eastern Alphas are willing to pay 3 times what you offered. And the Southern Coalition has made some very interesting proposals. Torsten felt ice in his veins. If Astrid armed his rivals with moon-silver weapons, it could destabilize the entire kingdom. You would do that, he asked. Turn against your own king. Astrid looked at him, and her eyes were cold as winter. You're not my king, Torsten. You made that clear when you chose Sigrid. I'm a vassal by law, but my loyalty, that's something you'll have to earn, just like everyone else. She was right. He had no claim on her loyalty, no right to expect her allegiance. He'd thrown it away for political convenience and a pretty face. What would it take, he asked quietly, for you to trust me again? Astrid studied him for a long moment. I don't think you can afford what that would cost, she said finally. Now come, your majesty. It's a long ride back, and you should return to your beautiful queen. The words stung, exactly as she intended them to. Torsten returned to the capital, but he couldn't stop thinking about Astrid. About the woman she'd become. About the opportunity he'd squandered. About the future that could have been his if he'd just had the courage to choose with his heart instead of his fears. His marriage to Sigrid deteriorated further. She'd heard about his visit to the borderlands and was furious. Not because she cared about him, but because she saw it as an insult to her status. They had a blazing argument that ended with her screaming, "You should have married your ugly little border wolf if you wanted someone to talk about mining and trade. I'm a queen, not some common merchant's wife." At least she's real, Torsten had snapped back. At least when you talk to her, there's an actual person responding, not just a beautiful mask. Sigrid had slapped him then. It was the first real emotion he'd ever seen from her, and it was pure rage. You'll regret this, she'd hissed. You'll regret choosing me, you'll regret rejecting her, and you'll spend the rest of your life living with your mistake. That's your punishment, Torsten. Not a quick death. Just a long, empty life with a wife who can't stand the sight of you and a kingdom that will never be as great as it could have been. She was right. That was the worst part. She was absolutely right. Then, 8 months after his wedding, disaster struck. The southern territories erupted into open rebellion. 3 powerful alphas had formed a coalition, and they were marching north with an army larger than anything Torsten could field. And leading them was someone Torsten had never expected, Sigrid's own father, Erik. The truth came out in pieces, like a puzzle revealing a nightmare. Sigrid had never wanted to be queen. She'd been planted by her father as a spy, a beautiful weapon designed to weaken Torsten from within. The extravagant spending, the poor governance, the way she'd driven wedges between Torsten and his council, it had all been intentional sabotage. And while Torsten had been distracted by his failing marriage, Erik had been building alliances, gathering forces, and preparing to take the throne by force. The moon-silver weapons Astrid had developed. Erik had been trying to secure those for his army, to give himself an unbeatable advantage. Torsten confronted Sigrid in the throne room. She didn't even bother denying it. "Did you really think my father would let some upstart boy king hold the most powerful throne in the north?" She laughed. "This was planned before I ever met you. I just had to be pretty enough to make you stupid." "You used me," Torsten said, his voice shaking with rage. "Of course I used you," Sigrid sneered. "That's what women like me do. We use men like you who think with their cocks instead of their crowns. You could have had that plain little Astrid and her loyalty and her brilliant mind and her genuine love. But you wanted the beautiful woman, so you got me instead. Congratulations, Your Majesty. You got exactly what you chose." Torsten had Sigrid arrested, but the damage was done. The rebel army was advancing, and his own forces were unprepared, undersupplied, and demoralized. His council met in emergency session, and the news was grim. They were outnumbered 3-1. The rebels had better positioning, more supplies, and the element of surprise. "We need allies," his general Bjorn said bluntly. "We need someone who can field troops and has the resources to sustain a prolonged campaign. Your Majesty, there's only one person who fits that description." Everyone in the room knew who he meant. The question was whether Torsten had the courage to ask for her help, and whether Astrid had any reason to give it. Torsten rode west again, this time with a much larger escort and far less ceremony. He arrived at Astrid's keep mud-stained and exhausted, having pushed his horse to the limit. She received him in her study, surrounded by maps and reports. She'd obviously heard about the rebellion and was already preparing her own response. "Have you come to beg?" she asked, not looking up from a supply manifest. "Or to command?" "I've come to ask," Torsten said, "and to offer you whatever you want in return." Now Astrid looked at him. "Whatever I want," she repeated. "Be careful making such open-ended promises, Your Majesty. You might not like what I ask for." "I'm not in a position to negotiate," Torsten said. "Erik's army will crush me within the month. Without your help, I'll lose everything. The throne, the kingdom, probably my life." Astrid set down her quill and leaned back in her chair. "Why should I help you?" she asked. "Give me one good reason why I should risk my people, my resources, my territory to save the man who humiliated me in front of the entire kingdom." "Because you're better than me," Torsten said simply. "Because you care about the common wolves, the farmers, the merchants, the children who deserve a future. Erik won't give them that. He's worse than I ever was. Cruel, ruthless, and corrupt. Under him, the suffering will be immense. I know you don't owe me anything, but you owe them. The people you've spent the last months protecting and nurturing. They deserve better than Erik." Astrid was quiet for a long time. "You're right," she said finally. "They do deserve better. They deserve better than Erik. Better than you. Better than any king we've had in generations." She stood and walked to the window, looking out over her territory. "I'll help you. But not because of anything you've said. I'll help because I won't let everything I've built be destroyed by that tyrant." "Thank you," Torsten breathed. "Name your price." Astrid turned back to him, and her storm-gray eyes were burning. "When this is over, you're going to give me a seat on your royal council, with full voting rights and authority over all matters concerning the borderlands. You're going to grant me autonomy over my territory. I'll pay taxes, but I'll govern as I see fit. And you're going to publicly acknowledge that you were wrong about me. Not some vague apology. A real, specific admission that you chose badly and I would have been the better queen." Torsten nodded. "Done. All of it." "I'm not finished," Astrid said softly. "One more thing. When you see me, when you work with me, when we're in the same room, you're going to remember every single day for the rest of your life what you threw away. You're going to look at me and know that I could have been yours. That we could have been happy. That your children could have been mine. And you're going to live with that regret forever. That's my price, Torsten. Your eternal remorse." It was the cruelest mercy Astrid could offer, and Torsten accepted it without hesitation. What choice did he have? But more than that, he knew he deserved it. Deserved that and worse. Astrid mobilized her forces with frightening efficiency. She fielded 3,000 trained warriors, equipped with moon-silver weapons and hardened by years of border warfare. But more importantly, she brought something Torsten's army had lost: hope. Her troops believed in her. They fought for her not out of duty or fear, but out of genuine devotion. The war that followed would be remembered in songs and stories for generations. The Battle of the Northern Pass, where Astrid's forces held a narrow defile against 5 times their number. The Siege of Oak Ridge, where she outmaneuvered Eric's best general and captured his entire supply train. The Moonlight Massacre, where moon-silver weapons proved their worth against Eric's shock troops. But the turning point came at the Battle of Raven's Field. The two armies met on a plain south of the capital in the largest engagement the kingdom had seen in a century. Torsten commanded the center, Astrid the right flank. Eric, confident in his superior numbers, ordered a direct assault. Should have worked. The rebels crashed into the loyalist lines like a wave, and Torsten's forces began to buckle. But Astrid had anticipated this. She'd studied Eric's tactics, understood his arrogance, and prepared accordingly. At the critical moment, she led a cavalry charge into the rebel flank, her moon-silver blade flashing in the afternoon sun. Torsten watched her from across the battlefield, and he felt something he'd never experienced before. Not just love but awe. Astrid was magnificent. She fought like a fury from old legends, cutting through enemy lines with brutal precision. Her troops followed her like she was a living banner, their courage drawn from her example. The rebel flank collapsed, then their center, and finally their commander, Eric himself, faced Astrid in single combat. It was brief and brutal. Eric was strong, experienced, and ruthless. But Astrid was something else entirely. She was fighting for everything she'd built, everyone she'd protected, and a future she refused to let be stolen by ambitious tyrants. Eric fell, and with him the rebellion died. The surviving rebels surrendered or fled. The kingdom was saved. And when the dust settled and the wounded were tended and the dead were counted, everyone knew who had really won the war. Not King Torsten. Lady Astrid. The celebration in the capital was immense, but Torsten couldn't enjoy it. He watched Astrid accept the gratitude of his people, saw them call her the savior of the north, the silver warrior, the shield of the kingdom. And he knew that they were right. She had saved them all. While he'd been weak and foolish, she'd become everything a ruler should be. At the victory feast, Torsten made good on his promise. Before the entire court, he stood and made his declaration. I stand before you to acknowledge a truth that many of you already know. When I chose my queen, I made a mistake. I let fear and vanity guide me instead of wisdom and heart. Lady Astrid Gunnarsdottir would have been a better queen than the woman I chose. She would have made me a better king. She would have made this a better kingdom. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I lacked the courage to choose her. The hall was silent. This wasn't the kind of thing kings admitted publicly. It was humiliating, emasculating even. But Torsten didn't care anymore. The truth was the truth, and Astrid had earned the right to hear it spoken aloud. Astrid stood, and for a moment Torsten thought he saw something in her eyes. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. You honor me with your honesty, your majesty, she said formally. I accept your acknowledgement. And I accept the seat on your royal council. May we build a better future together, even if not in the way we once imagined. She said it kindly, but Torsten heard the finality in those words. Whatever they might have had was gone forever. She would work with him, advise him, perhaps even become his friend. But she would never be his. That door had closed the day he rejected her, and no amount of regret could open it again. The weeks following the war were a blur of reconstruction and reorganization. Torsten formally annulled his marriage to Sigrid, who was exiled to a remote monastery for her treachery. His council underwent massive reforms, with Astrid becoming one of his most trusted advisors. True to his word, he granted her autonomy over the western borderlands, which continued to flourish under her governance. But the change went deeper than policy. Astrid's influence spread through the kingdom like water seeping into dry earth. Her ideas about education, about treating common wolves with dignity, about governance that served the people rather than just the nobles, these concepts began taking root. Torsten found himself becoming a better king, not because he'd suddenly grown wise, but because he had Astrid there to show him how. They worked together closely, and it was both wonderful and torturous. Torsten saw every day what he'd lost. Astrid's quick wit during council meetings, her compassion when dealing with petitioners, her strategic brilliance when planning infrastructure projects, the way she could make even the stuffiest noble laugh with a perfectly timed observation, the way she genuinely cared about every single person in the kingdom. And sometimes, in unguarded moments, he'd catch her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not hatred, not love, something more complicated. Something that spoke of wounds that had healed but left scars behind. One evening, about 6 months after the war, they were working late in the royal archives. They'd been researching old land treaties, trying to resolve a border dispute, and lost track of time. When they finally looked up, it was well past midnight and they were alone. "Do you ever wonder what might have been?" Torsten asked suddenly. He hadn't meant to say it, but the words escaped before he could stop them. Astrid was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," she admitted softly. "But then I remind myself that what might have been doesn't matter. Only what is. And what is this: a kingdom at peace, people living better lives, and two people who work well together but will never be together. That has to be enough." "Is it?" Torsten asked. "Is it enough for you?" Astrid looked at him, and in the candlelight, her face was softer than usual. "It has to be," she said. "Because the alternative is spending my life mourning something I never truly had. I won't do that, Torsten. I won't give you that power over me. You hurt me once. I won't let you hurt me again by pining for what can never be." "I would choose you now," Torsten said desperately. "If I could go back, if I could undo it." "But you can't," Astrid interrupted gently. "That's the point. You can't go back. None of us can. We can only go forward. And going forward means accepting that some mistakes can't be fixed, some hearts can't be mended, and some love stories aren't meant to have happy endings." "Do you hate me?" Torsten whispered. "No," Astrid said, and she sounded almost sad. "I did for a while. But hate is exhausting, and I had too much work to do to waste energy on hating you. Now I don't know what I feel. Regret that we couldn't have worked. Gratitude that you at least had the courage to admit your mistake. Respect for the king you're becoming. But love. No, Torsten. That died the day you chose Sigrid. And unlike kingdoms, dead love can't be resurrected." They sat in silence after that, both understanding that something had ended even as something else continued. They would work together. They would build a better kingdom together. But they would never be together. Not in the way they could have been. Not in the way that mattered. As the months turned into years, this became the rhythm of their lives. Astrid remained in the capital for parts of the year, serving on the council and advising Torsten on matters of state. She spent the rest of her time in the borderlands, continuing to develop her territory into a model of progressive governance. She never married. Many suitors came, powerful alphas drawn by her reputation, wealth, and proven capabilities. But Astrid turned them all away. Some said she was still in love with Torsten. Others said she was too proud to accept any man after being rejected by a king. But those who knew her best understood the truth. Astrid had discovered that she didn't need a mate to be complete. She had her work, her people, and her purpose. That was enough. Torsten never remarried either, though his council constantly pressured him to produce an heir. He took lovers occasionally, but they all complained about the same thing. Even when he was with them, he seemed somewhere else. Thinking about someone else. Haunted by someone else. "You're in love with Lady Astrid," one particularly perceptive woman told him after he called her by the wrong name in bed for the third time. "Why don't you just tell her?" "She knows," Torsten had replied. "But knowing doesn't change anything." The years passed. The kingdom flourished under their joint leadership. Historians would later call this the Golden Age of the North, a time of unprecedented peace, prosperity, and progress. Schools were built across the realm, adopting Astrid's educational model. Trade thrived. The arts flourished. Even the most remote villages saw improvements in their quality of life. But those who knew Torsten and Astrid personally saw the melancholy beneath the success. Saw the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching, with longing regret, and the painful awareness of what might have been. 10 years after that fateful rejection, something changed. It started with whispers from the southern territories. A new threat was rising, not a rebellion this time but something far worse. Ancient creatures that had been sleeping in the deep places of the world were waking. Creatures that made even the most powerful werewolves look weak by comparison. The first village was destroyed completely. Not conquered, destroyed. Every building razed, every person killed, the very earth scorched and salted. Then another village. Then another. The attacks were random, brutal, and unstoppable. Torsten's army couldn't fight these creatures. Traditional weapons were useless against them. Even moon silver, which could kill almost any supernatural being, barely slowed them down. Panic began to spread. Refugees fled north by the thousands. The kingdom that had known a decade of peace was suddenly facing annihilation. Astrid arrived at the capital with a full escort and urgent news. Torsten met her in his private chambers, and for the first time in years, he saw fear in her eyes. "I've been researching the old texts," she said without preamble. "These creatures, they're called the Drogborn. They're mentioned in the oldest sagas, from before even the first werewolf kings. They were sealed away by a group of warrior mages using a ritual that cost them their lives. But the seal has weakened over centuries, and now they're breaking free. How do we stop them?" Torsten asked. Astrid's expression was grim. The same way they were stopped before. With the same ritual. "But Torsten, the cost." Her voice broke. "The ritual requires a sacrifice. 2 people, bonded by true love, willingly giving their lives to power the seal. And not just any 2 people. They must be of royal blood and possess alpha power. They must love each other completely, without reservation. Only that kind of sacrifice has enough power to seal the Drogborn for another 1,000 years. The implications hung in the air between them like a sword suspended by a thread. 2 people of royal blood. True love. Alpha power. There was only one pair in the entire kingdom who met those requirements. "No," Torsten said immediately. "Absolutely not. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Astrid said quietly. "I've searched every text, consulted every scholar. This is the only solution. If we don't stop the Drogborn, they'll destroy everything. Every pack, every territory, every man, woman, and child in the kingdom. And then they'll move on to the next kingdom, and the next, until the entire world is ashes." "Then I'll do it," Torsten said. "Just me. My blood, my power." "It doesn't work that way," Astrid interrupted. "The ritual requires 2, male and female, the balance of opposing forces. And it requires love, Torsten. Real love. The kind that transcends death. The kind that's strong enough to hold back ancient evil for a millennium. Tell me, do you have that kind of love with anyone else?" She knew the answer. They both did. Torsten had never loved anyone but her. And Astrid, for all her protestations that her love had died, couldn't quite hide the truth in her eyes when she looked at him. "You said your love for me was dead," Torsten said, desperate now. "You said it couldn't be resurrected." "I lied," Astrid whispered. "I lied to protect myself, to protect us both. But the truth is, I never stopped loving you. I just learned to live with loving someone I could never have. That's not the same as not loving at all." Torsten crossed the room and took her hands. They were shaking. His were too. Then we won't do it, he said fiercely. We'll evacuate everyone north beyond the mountains. We'll run. We'll survive. And how many will die in the evacuation? Astrid asked. How many children, elderly, sick? How many won't make it? And where will we run? How long before the Draugborn follow? How many other kingdoms will fall because we were too cowardly to do what needed to be done? She squeezed his hands. You said once that you were a coward. That fear made you choose Sigrid over me. This is your chance, Torsten. Chance. To be brave when it matters most. I don't want to be brave, Torsten said, and his voice cracked. I want to be selfish. I want to keep you. I want the life we should have had. We can't have that, Astrid said, tears streaming down her face now. But we can have this. We can save them all. Every person in this kingdom. Every child who deserves to grow up. Every couple who deserves to grow old together. We can give them the future we'll never have. Isn't that worth something? Torsten pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. It's worth everything, he choked out. But I just found you again. How can I lose you now? You never lost me, Astrid said against his chest. I was always here. We just ran out of time. They had 3 days before the ritual needed to be performed. 3 days before the Draugborn reached the populated heart of the kingdom. 3 days to say goodbye to everything they'd ever known. Torsten wanted to spend every moment with Astrid, to hoard those precious hours like a miser with gold. But she had other ideas. We need to prepare the kingdom, she said. They need to know what's happening. They need to understand why we're doing this. And they need a plan for what comes after. So they spent those 3 days working, making arrangements for the succession. Torsten had a cousin, Magnus, who would make a good king. Astrid's territory would pass to her younger brother, Ragnar, who had learned well from her example. They wrote letters to everyone they loved. They finalized treaties and trade agreements. They did all the practical, necessary things that needed doing. But at night, when the work was done and the castle slept, they were together. Finally, truly together in the way they'd only been once before, all those years ago under a new moon. They made love with desperate tenderness, trying to memorize every touch, every breath, every moment. They talked until dawn, sharing all the conversations they'd never had, all the dreams they'd never fulfilled, all the love they'd never expressed. Tell me about the children we would have had, Astrid whispered on the second night, curled against his chest. Torsten closed his eyes, imagining. A daughter with your eyes and your brilliant mind. She would have been magnificent. Maybe a son with my stubbornness and your compassion. He would have been wise beyond his years. They would have been beautiful, Astrid said softly. And they would have made the kingdom better, just like we tried to do. They would have had the best mother in the world, Torsten said, his voice thick with unshed tears. On the 3rd day, they rode out to the place of the ritual. It was an ancient stone circle in the mountains, weathered by time and forgotten by most. Astrid had found it in her research. The very place where the first sealing had been performed 1,000 years ago. The entire court had come to see them off. Thousands of people lined the route from the castle to the mountains, silent and weeping. They knew what was about to happen, knew what their king and their savior were sacrificing for them. At the stone circle, they were met by an ancient priestess, one of the few who still remembered the old ways. She would guide them through the ritual. Her face was somber as she explained what would happen. The magic will bind your souls together, she said. And then it will consume you, transforming your life force into the power needed to seal the Draugborn. It will be painful, but it will be quick. And you will die together, bound by love. There are worse fates. Are there? Torsten asked bitterly. But he knew there were. Losing Astrid and living on without her, that would be worse. Watching the kingdom burn because he was too cowardly to act, that would be worse. This way at least they would be together at the end. They stood in the center of the circle as the sun began to set. The priestess began her chanting, and ancient runes carved into the stones began to glow. Power gathered in the air, making it heavy and hard to breathe. "I love you," Torsten said, taking Astrid's hands. "I should have said it 10 years ago in front of everyone. I should have chosen you. I should have been brave." "You're being brave now," Astrid said, smiling through her tears. "That's what matters. And I love you too. I always did. Even when I hated you. Even when I tried not to. You were always the one." The magic intensified. The runes blazed brighter. Torsten felt power flowing out of him, drawn by forces beyond his comprehension. It should have hurt, but all he felt was Astrid's hands in his, her eyes locked on his, her love surrounding him like warmth on a cold night. "Don't let go," she whispered. "Never," he promised. The world turned white with power. Torsten felt his very essence being pulled apart, transformed, woven together with Astrid's until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. They were one. Truly, completely one. Bound by love so strong that it transcended flesh, transcended death, transcended everything. In those final moments, Torsten saw everything. He saw the Drogborn being pulled back into their prison, sealed by the power of his and Astrid's sacrifice. He saw the kingdom safe, prosperous, continuing to grow and flourish. He saw Magnus crowned as the new king, ruling wisely with Astrid's principles guiding him. He saw children playing in streets that would have been graveyards without their sacrifice. He saw the future they'd bought with their lives, a future bright with hope and possibility. And he saw Astrid, truly saw her, without the veil of flesh or the limitations of mortal sight. He saw her soul, brilliant and beautiful, burning with a light that put the sun to shame. And he understood, finally, what he'd been too blind to see all those years ago. That true beauty had nothing to do with faces or forms. That Astrid had always been the most beautiful woman in the world. He'd just been too shallow to recognize it. "I see you," he told her with something beyond words. "Finally, truly, I see you." "I know," she responded in the same way. "And it only took dying for you to understand." Even in death, she could make him laugh. The light faded. When the priestess opened her eyes, the stone circle was empty. Torsten and Astrid were gone, not even ashes remaining. But the runes carved into the ancient stones now glowed with a steady, eternal light. The seal was complete. The Drogborn were imprisoned for another 1,000 years. The kingdom mourned. For weeks, people wore black and wept openly in the streets. Songs were written about the Alpha King who learned too late where true worth lay, and the rejected bride who became greater than any queen. Stories were told about their sacrifice, their love, and the kingdom they saved with their deaths. But slowly life went on. Magnus proved to be a wise and compassionate king, governing according to the principles Torsten and Astrid had established. The prosperity continued. The reforms deepened. The kingdom they'd built together survived them, grew beyond them, became something even greater than they'd imagined. And in the stone circle in the mountains, where the sacrifice had been made, people began to report strange occurrences. On clear nights, some claimed to see two figures standing together among the stones, a tall man and a woman with storm-gray eyes, their hands intertwined, watching over the kingdom they'd saved. Others heard voices on the wind, laughing and talking like old friends, or lovers who'd finally found peace. The priestess, when asked about these reports, would only smile mysteriously. "Love that strong doesn't simply end," she'd say. "It transforms. Perhaps they're still here in some way. Still protecting us. Still together, as they always should have been." Years passed. Decades. The generation that had known Torsten and Astrid personally died out, but the stories remained. New threats rose and were defeated. New kings and queens came and went. But the kingdom endured, built on the foundation those two had laid. And in the western borderlands, in Astrid's old territory, they built a monument. Not to mourn but to remember. Two statues standing side by side, Torsten and Astrid, not as king and queen but as equals, partners. Two people who'd loved imperfectly, lost each other, found each other again, and ultimately gave everything for something greater than themselves. The inscription at the base read, "Here stood two souls who learned too late that true love requires not just feeling but courage. May all who see this remember. Choose with your heart before your time runs out. Some chances come only once." It became a pilgrimage site. Couples would travel from across the realm to stand before the monument and pledge their love. They'd promise to be braver than Torsten, to see worth beyond surface beauty, to choose with wisdom and heart combined. And many claimed that if they were sincere, if their love was true, they'd feel a warmth wash over them, a blessing from two souls who knew better than most what it meant to waste precious time. One young man, standing before the monument with his beloved, asked the question that many had wondered. Do you think they regretted it? Dying for the kingdom? His companion, a woman with uncommon wisdom, shook her head. I think they regretted the 10 years they wasted. But the dying, well, that was the one thing they did completely right. They chose each other when it mattered most. They died together rather than live apart. And they saved everyone they loved. What's to regret in that? But our story doesn't quite end there. Because 300 years after the sacrifice, something extraordinary happened. A young woman arrived at the stone circle, claiming to have visions. She was a seer, gifted with the ability to perceive things beyond the mortal realm. And what she saw in that circle changed everything. They're not gone, she told the priestesses who maintained the sacred site. Their souls are bound together, held in the magic of the seal. They're conscious. Where? They've been watching over the kingdom for 3 centuries, unable to move on, but unable to truly die either. They're trapped. Horror swept through those who heard. Trapped for 300 years, watching the world move on without them, unable to touch it, unable to leave. It seemed less like a noble sacrifice and more like an eternal prison. But when the seer returned to the circle and communed with their spirits, asking if they wanted to be released, the answer shocked everyone. No, came Torsten's voice through the seer. This is where we choose to be. We have each other, Astrid added. We have purpose. We protect what we love. And we have time. All the time we didn't have in life. We're together, truly together, in a way we never could have been if we'd lived. This isn't a prison. It's a gift. But don't you want peace? The seer asked. Don't you want to rest? There was a pause. Then Astrid's voice came again, warm with an emotion the seer could only interpret as contentment. We have peace. We have each other. What more could we want? The seer reported this conversation, and it spread across the kingdom. The mourning that had persisted for 3 centuries transformed into something else. Not sadness, but a strange kind of joy. Because Torsten and Astrid had found their happy ending after all. Not in the way anyone expected. Not in life but in death. Not in separation but in eternal union. Young people especially loved the story. It became a symbol of love that transcended everything. Appearance, status, mortality itself. Love like Torsten and Astrid became a phrase that meant loving completely, courageously, despite all obstacles. But there were lessons too. Warnings wrapped in the romantic tale. Don't waste time like Torsten did. Don't let fear make your choices. Don't judge by surfaces when depth is what matters. Love courageously while you can, because second chances aren't guaranteed. And even when they come, they may cost more than you ever imagined. The story became a mirror that people held up to their own lives. How many chose security over passion? How many let fear guide their hearts? How many rejected someone extraordinary because they didn't fit conventional standards of beauty or success? And how many spent their lives regretting it, just as Torsten had? The tale forced uncomfortable questions. It demanded introspection. It challenged the way people thought about love, about worth, about what truly mattered in choosing a partner and building a life. Now, 1,000 years after that fateful rejection in the great hall of Nordheim Castle, the story of Torsten and Astrid is still told. The kingdom they saved has grown into an empire. The reforms they pioneered have spread across the entire continent. Education is universal. Common people have rights and voices. Women can own property, lead armies, govern territories. The world they helped create is one they would barely recognize, so much has changed. But human nature and werewolf nature remains the same. People still judge by appearances. They still choose with fear instead of courage. They still waste precious time on the wrong people and let the right ones slip away. They still make the same mistakes Torsten made, over and over again. And so the story persists. Parents tell it to children. Teachers share it with students. Priests recite it at weddings, as both inspiration and warning, because it contains truths that every generation needs to hear. Truths about love and loss, about courage and cowardice, about seeing past surfaces to the heart beneath, about second chances and fatal mistakes, about sacrifice and redemption, about choosing wisely before time runs out. The stone circle in the mountains is still there, the runes still glowing with steady light. The Drogborn remain sealed in their prison. And according to those sensitive to such things, two souls still stand guard over the kingdom they died to protect, bound together by a love that proved stronger than death itself. Some say that on certain nights, when the moon is new as it was on the night of their first kiss, you can hear voices in the circle. Soft conversation, quiet laughter, the sound of two people who have literally eternity to talk and still find new things to say to each other. Is the story true? All of it, some of it, or none of it? Does it matter? Because whether it happened exactly as told or is a legend that grew in the telling, the truths it contains are real. The warnings it offers are valid. The lessons it teaches are ones we all need to learn. How many Torstens walk among us, choosing with fear instead of courage? How many Astrids are overlooked, underestimated, rejected because they don't fit narrow definitions of beauty or worth? How many love stories never happen because someone lacks the bravery to choose with their heart? How many people spend their lives regretting the one that got away, the chance they didn't take, the love they were too afraid to claim? The story of the Alpha King and his rejected bride is ultimately a story about us. About the choices we make and the prices we pay. About the courage required to see past surfaces. About the tragedy of wasted time and the blessing of second chances, however painful they may be. About love that transcends everything, even death itself, when given the chance to prove itself. It's a story that asks us to look at our own lives and ask uncomfortable questions. Who are we rejecting because they don't meet superficial standards? Who are we choosing for the wrong reasons? What fears are guiding our hearts instead of wisdom? What chances are we letting slip away because we're too cowardly to seize them? What loves are we killing through neglect, through cowardice, through caring more about what others think than what we actually feel? And perhaps most importantly, the story reminds us that true beauty isn't found in perfect features or flawless forms. It's found in brilliant minds, compassionate hearts, courageous spirits, and souls that burn bright with purpose and passion. Astrid was always beautiful. Torsten was just too blind to see it until it was too late. How many of us are making the same mistake right now? The story also teaches us about redemption. Torsten made a terrible mistake, but he didn't spend his life running from it. He faced it, acknowledged it, worked to become better. And ultimately, when given the choice between his life and doing what was right, he chose right. He became, in the end, the man Astrid always saw he could be. That's a kind of victory, even in defeat. That's a way of transforming tragedy into meaning. And Astrid, she teaches us that being rejected doesn't mean being defeated. That the person who doesn't choose you isn't the arbiter of your worth. That you can take pain and transform it into power, rejection into resilience, heartbreak into greatness. She didn't need Torsten's crown to become a queen. She built her own kingdom, earned her own throne, and proved that the best revenge is becoming so extraordinary that the one who rejected you spends the rest of their life regretting it. But she also teaches us about the cost of that strength. Because being strong doesn't mean you stop hurting. Just means you hurt while still moving forward. Astrid never stopped loving Torsten, even as she built her walls and achieved her greatness. That love was both her weakness and her strength. It hurt her and saved her. It destroyed her and made her. That's the complicated truth about love. It can do all of those things at once. The story reminds us, too, that some mistakes really can't be undone. Some hearts, once broken, can't be fully mended. Some chances, once lost, never come again. Torsten and Astrid got their second chance, but it came at the ultimate price. They found their way back to each other, but only by leaving the world behind. That's not the happy ending anyone would choose. But perhaps it's the one they earned. Bittersweet, painful, but real in a way that fairy tale endings rarely are. Their story challenges the notion that love conquers all. Sometimes love conquers nothing. Sometimes it's too late, the damage too deep, the time too wasted. But their story also shows that even damaged love, even love that comes too late, can still be powerful enough to save the world. That's something. That's not nothing. And in the end, they chose each other. When it mattered most, when everything was on the line, they chose each other. Not perfectly. Not without pain. Not in a way that let them live happily ever after. But they chose each other nonetheless. And they transformed their wasted time, their mistakes, their regrets into something meaningful. They turned their tragic love story into an act of salvation. They proved that it's never too late to be brave, even if being brave means dying together rather than living apart. Is that romantic? Horrifying? Both. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the point is simply that they found meaning in their mistakes. They transformed their tragedy into triumph. They saved everyone they loved, even at the cost of saving themselves. And they remained together, bound by love so strong that not even death could separate them. So what do we take from this story? What lessons do we carry forward? Choose with courage, not fear. Look past surfaces to the soul beneath. Don't waste time on the wrong people or let the right ones slip away. Recognize worth in unconventional places. Be willing to admit when you're wrong. Work to become better, even if it's too late to fix your biggest mistakes. Transform your pain into purpose. Build your own kingdom if the one you wanted won't have you. And if you're lucky enough to get a second chance, no matter how painful, seize it with both hands and don't let go. Love fiercely while you can. Love courageously despite the risks. Love the person, not the image. Love depth over surface, substance over style, character over conventional beauty. And if you find someone who loves you back with that same intensity, that same courage, that same depth, don't you dare let fear make you throw it away. 'Cause time is shorter than you think. Chances are rarer than you believe. And true love, the kind that sees you fully, challenges you constantly, makes you better eternally, that's the rarest thing in the world. When you find it, you fight for it. You choose it. You protect it. You don't sacrifice it on the altar of what others think or what seems safer or what's more conventionally acceptable. Torsten learned that lesson the hardest way possible. Don't make his mistake. Don't be the person who spends their life regretting the one who got away. Don't be the coward who chooses with fear instead of heart. Don't be the fool who can't see beauty when it's standing right in front of you. And if you've already made Torsten's mistake, if you've already chosen wrong, already let the right person go, already wasted precious time, then learn from Astrid. Build something extraordinary from your pain. Become so magnificent that your worth can't be denied. Don't let rejection define you. Don't let heartbreak diminish you. Grow. Transform. Prove that the person who rejected you made the biggest mistake of their life. But also, and this is important, don't let bitterness consume you. Astrid never did. She was hurt, deeply hurt, but she didn't let that hurt poison her. She remained capable of love, of kindness, of compassion. She built instead of destroyed. She nurtured instead of withering. She chose life in all its complicated glory, instead of hiding in her wounds. That's real strength. Not pretending you're not hurt but moving forward anyway. Not closing your heart to protect it but keeping it open despite the risk. Not letting one person's failure to see your worth convince you that you're worthless. Finding your own worth, building your own kingdom, becoming your own hero. And if fate is kind, if the universe decides to give you and your Torsten another chance, well, then you'll have to decide if some mistakes can be forgiven. If some loves deserve a second chapter. If growth and change and genuine remorse are enough to build something new on the ruins of what was broken. That's not an easy question. There's no right answer. Every person has to decide for themselves what they can forgive, what they can rebuild, what they're willing to risk their heart on again. Astrid decided that dying together was better than living apart. Was she right? Was Torsten? Or did they both simply make the best choice available from a set of terrible options? We can't know. We can only learn from their story and try to make better choices in our own lives. The beauty of their story, and yes, it is beautiful despite all the pain, is that it forces us to confront these questions. Doesn't give us easy answers. It doesn't promise that love conquers all or that everything works out in the end. It's messy and complicated and painful, just like real love often is. But it's also powerful and transformative and ultimately meaningful, just like real love can be. In a world that often reduces love to superficial attraction or convenient partnerships, the story of Torsten and Astrid reminds us that real love is something else entirely. It's seeing someone fully and loving them anyway. It's choosing courage over fear. It's building something together that's greater than either person alone. It's sacrifice and service and constant choosing day after day to put someone else's well-being alongside your own. And sometimes, yes, it's giving up everything, including your life, for the person you love and the people you both serve. That's the ultimate expression of love. Not flowers and chocolates and convenient romance, but sacrifice, service, selflessness, choosing the greater good even when it costs you everything personal. Is that what we should all aspire to? Dying for our loved ones? Well, of course not. Most of us will never face that choice. Thank the gods. But we can aspire to the principle behind it. We can aspire to love that's bigger than our own comfort, deeper than our own fears, stronger than our own selfishness. We can aspire to be like Astrid, seeing our own worth even when others don't, building our own kingdoms when the one we wanted won't have us, transforming pain into power and rejection into resilience. We can aspire to her courage, her wisdom, her refusal to let heartbreak make her small. We can aspire to be better than Torsten was, choosing with courage instead of fear, seeing past surfaces, admitting our mistakes, working to become worthy of the love we want. We can aspire to his eventual growth, his willingness to face his failures, his ultimate choice of love over life. We can aspire to their ending, bound together by love so strong that not even death can break it, serving something greater than themselves, finding meaning and purpose and connection even in sacrifice. That's not a bad legacy. That's not a wasted life. That's something that matters. And isn't that what we all want in the end? Matter. To love and be loved. To see and be seen. To build something that outlasts us. To transform our mistakes into lessons, our pain into wisdom, our lives into stories worth telling. The story of the Alpha King who dumped his true love for a beautiful bride, and the rejected woman who stole his heart, his throne, and ultimately his very soul, is a story about all of us. About the choices we make. About the prices we pay. About the courage required to love truly and the consequences of loving falsely. About seeing worth where others see weakness. About building kingdoms from rejection. About finding your way home even if home costs everything. It's a story that reminds us that true beauty is found not in perfect features, but in brilliant minds and courageous hearts. That true worth isn't measured in status or appearance, but in character and compassion. That true love isn't convenient or easy or safe, but it's worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth everything. So look around you. Who are you overlooking? Who have you rejected for superficial reasons? Who are you choosing out of fear instead of love? What chances are you letting slip away? What loves are you killing through cowardice? What kingdoms could you build if you stopped waiting for someone else to give you permission to be great? Don't be Torsten before he learned his lesson. Don't waste precious time. Don't let fear make your choices. Don't reject someone extraordinary because they don't fit narrow definitions of beauty or success. Don't spend your life regretting the one that got away. Be Astrid. Be brave. Be brilliant. Build your own kingdom. Know your worth. Transform your pain into power. And if a second chance comes, If love offers you another opportunity despite all the mistakes and all the wasted time, have the courage to seize it. Even if it costs everything. Especially if it costs everything. Because in the end, we're all just trying to matter. To love and be loved. To build something meaningful from the messy, complicated, beautiful disaster of being alive. And if we're very lucky, we'll find someone to build it with. Someone who sees us truly, challenges us constantly, loves us completely. That's rare. That's precious. That's worth everything. Don't let it go. Don't be the person who realizes too late what they had. Don't be the story that ends with, if only. Be the story that ends with, we chose each other, we fought for each other, we were brave for each other. Even if that story is shorter than you wanted. Even if it costs more than you imagined. Even if it ends in ways you never expected. Because love like that, love like Torsten and Astrid's, love that transcends death itself, that's the story worth living. That's the story worth being. That's the story that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about your own choices, your own loves, your own life, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments. Are you more like Torsten or Astrid? Have you ever let fear make you choose wrong? Have you ever had to build your own kingdom after being rejected? What lessons from this story speak to your own journey? And here's something special. Tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug. Whether you're in New York or Tokyo, London or Sydney or Sao Paulo, Mumbai or Mexico City. Wherever you are, I want to connect with you. I want to know that these words found you. That this story mattered to you. That you're not alone in your struggles with love and choice and courage. Drop your city in the comments. Share your story. Let's build a community of people who are choosing courage over fear, substance over surface, depth over shallow beauty. Let's be the generation that learns from Torsten and Astrid's mistakes, and their triumphs. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That friend who's settling for less than they deserve. That family member who can't see their own worth. That person who's letting fear make their choices. Share it. Because stories like this, stories that challenge us and change us and make us think, those are the stories that change the world one heart at a time. Subscribe if you want more stories that make you feel, make you think, make you question everything you thought you knew about love and life and what really matters. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale that could change your perspective forever. And remember, you are enough. You are worthy. You are beautiful in ways that transcend appearance. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, convince you otherwise. Build your kingdom. Love courageously. Choose wisely. And never, ever let fear steal your chance at something extraordinary. Now go. Close this video. Look at your life. Make the choice you've been too afraid to make. Send the message you've been holding back. Tell someone you love them. Leave someone who doesn't value you. Apply for that position. Start that project. Be brave. Be bold. Be the hero of your own story instead of the cautionary tale in someone else's. Your time is limited. Your chances are finite. Don't waste them. Don't be Torsten before he learned his lesson. Be the person who chooses right the first time. Or if you've already chosen wrong, be the person who has the courage to admit it, learn from it, and do better going forward. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, love fiercely, live bravely, and never